only thing that never lies. It shows us as we truly are. But what if, one day, when you look into it, you see something foreign, not what you expected? Imagine your mind playing a cruel trick on you, your memories becoming tangled, and the boundaries of reality dissolving. You are an investigator, solving a series of brutal murders. But the deeper you dig, the more terrifying the truth becomes. This is the story of Thomas White, a man who encountered the most sinister mystery of his life and found no way out. Detective Thomas White was what his colleagues called a natural-born hunter. He had an intuition that bordered on the supernatural. He noticed details that others missed. He knew when a suspect was lying and could push anyone to a confession. But this case was different. For 6 months, Thomas had been hunting a killer the newspapers called the Faceless Butcher. 9 victims. Each one had their face mutilated, as if the murderer wanted to erase their identity. But the strangest part, there was always a mirror beside each body. The butcher left no traces, was never caught on camera. His silhouette always remained in the shadows. Either he was incredibly careful, or the darkness itself was helping him. But Thomas didn't believe in the supernatural. He believed in evidence and methodical work. And finally, luck was on his side. The suspect was caught. He was found in an abandoned house where he'd been hiding for weeks. But something was off. The man didn't resist. He didn't say a single word. Even when he was brought to the station and placed in the interrogation room, he just sat in the dark, calm, waiting. Thomas was sure he had finally come face to face with a monster. But he didn't yet know who was truly sitting across from him. The interrogation room was lit by a single lamp. The light fell directly on the table, leaving the corners of the room shrouded in deep shadow. The suspect sat across from Thomas, but his face was lost in the darkness, as if the very air was hiding him. Thomas threw a stack of photos onto the table. On them, bodies of victims, mutilated beyond recognition. "You killed them." Thomas's voice was steady but firm. The suspect remained silent. "I asked you a question." Thomas leaned forward. "Did you kill them?" The man tilted his head slightly, as if studying him. Then, in a quiet voice, he said, "What if they killed themselves?" Thomas narrowed his eyes. "What does that mean?" he replied. They looked in the mirror and saw the truth. Thomas clenched his jaw. These cryptic answers were making him angry. He was used to ordinary killers, vile, cowardly, but predictable. This one was different. "Why did you leave the mirrors?" Thomas asked sharply. He replied, "How else do you show someone their true face?" The suspect's voice was disturbingly calm. "You're afraid to look in the mirror, too, aren't you, Thomas?" Thomas tensed. "I'm not afraid of anything." "Really? Then let's talk about them." The man lifted his cuffed hands and nodded at the photographs. David Graham, 42 years old, found dead in his apartment. Face completely destroyed. Cameras recorded him entering, but no one ever left. Thomas remembered that case. It was the first one. Oh, Jessica Hale. 29 years old, kind, cheerful, until she looked in the mirror. She lived alone. No one entered her apartment. But you know what's strange? She left a note. I can't keep pretending it's not me. Thomas felt his heart tighten. Enough! No, we need to talk about this, Tom. You wanted the truth, didn't you? He ran a finger over the last photograph. And what about Michael Randall? 51 years old, a retired officer. You worked with him once, remember? He said you had a gift, that you see more than others. How strange. Because that night, he clearly saw something. Something that made him tear his own face off. Thomas sprang up, knocking over his chair. Shut up! The suspect didn't move. A faint shadow of a smile appeared in the darkness. You know who I am, Thomas. His voice was soft, almost gentle. You've known for a long time. Thomas turned to the two-way mirror. Something was wrong with the reflection. It lagged behind, as if he wasn't looking at himself, but at someone else. No! He exhaled. The figure across from him began to move, slowly, like a shadow, creeping out of the darkness. Thomas felt cold. When the suspect's face finally entered the light, his heart stopped. He was looking into his own eyes. The interrogation room door burst open with a crash. Detective Reed, Thomas's partner, rushed in. Thomas stood, barely holding himself up, his hands trembling. Before him, an empty chair. No one, no suspect, not even a trace of his presence. Only the scattered photographs on the table. Reed grabbed Thomas by the shoulders and asked Tom, "Are you okay?" Thomas squeezed his eyes shut, trying to hold on to reality. Everything around him began to blur. The walls dissolved into darkness, but when he opened them again, the interrogation room was gone. Now he was sitting in a solitary cell, a gray, cold prison. Before him, a mirror. He looked different. Dark circles under his eyes, pale skin, but his reflection was smiling. Thomas, it whispered, without moving its lips. Now you see, we fear monsters under our beds. We fear shadows in the night. But real monsters don't hide in the dark. They stare at us from the mirror. Thomas White was the best detective, a hunter of criminals. But what if the entire hunt wasn't leading him to the killer, but to himself? Be careful when looking into a mirror. Sometimes it shows more than you are ready to see. Think about it. Is it really worth subscribing to this channel? Because next time you look into the mirror, you might see me.